Investment and insurance products are not insured by the FDIC or any federal government agency, are not a deposit or other obligation of, or guaranteed by the bank or any bank affiliate, and are subject to investment risk, including possible loss of the principal amount invested.
Hello, I'm Wendy Wilson, and I'd like to welcome you to another edition of Realizing Potential. I have been scheduling and rescheduling this guest. She has a very demanding schedule. She does so many things for her current employer, and then also she is very committed to the community of Albany, and she has a capacity with the Chamber of Commerce here. But I'll let her tell you a little bit more about that. I know I'm just introducing to a small population of people the amazing Miss Jeretha Peters. How are you today?
Oh, thank you. You're so gracious and kind.
Oh, it's all true. It's all true. You know that. But I didn't share with the viewers that you were an alum of Albany State University. So share with that small number of individuals a little bit about your background, when you started at Albany State, your chosen major, and what made you go into that discipline.
So that's great. I think about starting at Albany State. I'm a 2004 graduate of the unthinkable Albany State University. But my first interaction with Albany State was probably the summer of 96 or 97.
Okay.
And I met a person in the name of Dr. Lois Banks Holly. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, she saw something in this little South Georgia girl. And she kind of mentored me for a summer. I went through a summer program here, and we just kind of gravitated toward one another. And so when I was thinking through what I wanted to do for college and where I wanted to go, Albany State was not my first choice because, like most children, I want to go away from home. I want to spread my wings. I want to be more than 500 miles away. And more realistically, when I started thinking through cost, I had gotten a transfer scholarship here, and I started thinking, I don't have to take out student loans. I don't have to pay for anything, and I got a refund. So it just became a little bit more evident that Albany State probably was the best choice for me, not only because of the financials, but because I remembered how Dr. Holly embraced me. She helped me think through making decisions when I was thinking about what I wanted my major to be, finding what my passion was, and I wasn't quite sure that I'd find that anywhere else.
Sure.
And so I decided to come to Albany State, major in accounting because I had a love for numbers. And what I thought I was going to do was take my CPA exam and be a tax preparer and an accountant, and my path has just kind of gone a little different way.
A little different? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, funny story, I too thought I wanted to major in accounting, and I got to intermediate accounting and said, yeah, this is a hard no for me. Yeah, it was just a level of discipline and focus that in all transparency I just did not have. Right. So hats off to those individuals who can, like yourself. So you majored in accounting, and then what was life like for you after that point?
So fortunately, I had already started in a banking career it was Trust Company Bank at that time. And it just, was going to be a natural transition. I was already in the accounting department. I was accounts receivable clerk. And so that was where I thought I was going to be. And when I finished at Albany State and was preparing to take the CPA exam, I have had a series of moments in my life where I've either had a conversation with somebody where they thought to offer a suggestion that was really a seed to confirm some things for me. And I was on an elevator ride at work, and a person asked me, hey, do you really like sitting in that little cubicle all day long and not talking to people because you seem like you're so outgoing? And I thought, I never considered. Why would you say that? So on our elevator ride down, he actually offered me an opportunity in the investment department that I had never considered. And I wasn't even familiar with investments, and my parents never talked about investments when I was growing up. My family was very conservative. It was save, 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 budget, 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 don't overspend. But we never really talked about investments. And my little curious mind started wondering, well, what can I do in investments, and how can my degree support that journey and changing my career. And so fortunately I didn't have to worry about that much longer, because SunTrust announced layoffs. And little did I know at that point I would be forced to make some decisions. And I spoke to our HR person, and she said absolutely there's still that position in investments. And I decided to apply and got the position in investments. So I was only in accounting for about 18 months after I graduated. And then I went to I went to the investment department, and I became fascinated. It's real nerdy, geeky kind of things, but I got really fascinated in the quantitative analysis of investments and how to build portfolios and what did that look like, because it was new to me. Nobody was having those conversations in my family about investments. So that's where I decided to kind of, lock in for a while, and been locked in there for the past 25 years.
Outstanding. I don't want to miss a point that you made, because I think it's particularly important for our students to understand. And when I have an opportunity to engage with them or connect with anyone who they're trying to develop themselves, I remind them that you are always interviewing for your next opportunity. You may not know what that opportunity is, but someone is always paying attention to what you're doing, what you're not doing, how well you perform. The list goes on. So I don't know what your professional connection was. Certainly you with this gentleman or the individual that was on the elevator ride with you, but you certainly doesn't sound like they were in the same immediate space. But in that 18-month window, you had made established a presence and a connection where you were being watched and observed, not to stay in that opportunity that you were currently at that time serving in, but for something new. So it's a valuable and a very important lesson on you are always being watched.
I'll definitely echo that. You're always being watched. But for me, it was even beyond that.
Okay.
I have always come from a family that has its fundamental core generosity and service. And one of the things that I learned in primary school, elementary school, and we don't really understand the impact of those things until we can translate it and realize, like, that's what it meant. I used to be very proud that I got an E when I used my time wisely, right? So it's my first job, and, sometimes I would have some extra time. And I would often just walk around and ask people, like, do you need help with anything, right? I didn't like long, boring days. That was really the reason.
Okay.
And in doing so, I was often sent to support and help the executive assistant of the bank at the time. And she was responsible for preparing for board meetings, putting together the board of directors presentations. This was before emails and PowerPoints.
Wow.
We were still in notebooks, so taking out the old thing. So the late Dolores Presley, she taught me a lot. She taught me how to make gift baskets when we had to make gift baskets for the board members. That intrigued me. Planning for client events. So I then began helping her plan for client events because that was one of her responsibilities. So a lot of the things that people saw in me was just because I started volunteering for things, because I just didn't want to sit in my cube. What most people don't know about accounting, we really only have like a week worth of work, because there's reconciliation, there's debit entries, but then you kind of have to wait. It's very a reactive type position. Sure. And so I had a lot of window of opportunity to just kind of engage, which is probably why they thought, you're more social than you're giving yourself credit for. You're asking people for help. I used to talk to the guys in the mail room, and, I would walk proactively to get my mail and take everybody else's mail, because I was like, I'm going to pass their way anyway. So understanding that, number one, you're always being watched, and that's a good thing, but also looking for opportunities to serve and help others. That's always been the tenet of how my parents raised me.
Outstanding. And along the way, building relationships, lasting relationships that would, again, open up those doors of opportunity for you. So you've been in investments, you said, for 25 years.
Yes.
Yeah. You made a particular point. I think this happens in a lot of households, particularly in certain communities where the focus of the day is just to survive. Yeah. So, and they're all across the land. We know that. So those conversations aren't had in those households, typically because we're just trying to make sure that we can survive for day to day. So you have now ventured off into this foreign space. Obviously, it has been a success for you. 25 years. Speak to those students or those individuals out in the community that are watching the value of investment, and particularly even if you are still just trying to make it day to day, why you should consider the different means and ways in which you can still invest.
So I like to broaden most people's scope of investments, because when we think traditional banking, we think through checking accounts and savings accounts. Well, CDs are a form of investments, money markets, and there are other safe conservative tools. I'm not making any recommendations, but what I like to speak to is the understanding of why we should take appropriate risk. And traditionally in the African American community, we're very conservative.
Sure.
We don't like to take risk. Even when I'm recruiting for students to come into our field, a lot of our income is variable, and that's very uncomfortable because we like the assurance of, I'm going to get my check on this day and it's going to be this amount. And so this is a career that oftentimes Black students don't try to explore because of the uncertainty of how I'm going to get paid. And I was that student as well, so I totally get it. But fortunately, there are more and more conversations around the racial wealth gap, the transfer of wealth between generations that we weren't having 25 years ago when I was growing up. I don't know if it was a point of pride for our parents not to have that conversation, but surely now, as there has been an intentionality about wealth, that conversation about making sure everyone has an opportunity for whatever their successes are. It's a little bit more of a comfortable conversation, and I encourage all people to begin exploring what does that look like. So it can be incremental. To your point, if there's a person that says, hey, I'm not comfortable with the stock market, that's fine. Perhaps consider a CD. Like right now would be an explosive time to consider because rates are high. And higher than they have been in the past 10 years. So just taking one step, whatever that incremental step is. So if you're exploring CDs, then maybe you want to consider exploring mutual funds or money markets or, annuities, just engaging with a professional just to understand how to create an appetite for risk, because there is a relationship to risk and reward. The more risk you're willing to take, oftentimes there is a greater reward for it. And having those conversations and finding a circle that supports you and help you work through that, because again, like you said, if you're struggling or you're just trying to focus on surviving, it may be the first adjustment you need to make is finding a circle of people that have made it from surviving to thriving.
I love that. Yeah, the representation and the example, that is certainly important. Yeah. So I can't imagine what your portfolio looks like on a daily basis, let alone a weekly and a monthly basis as it relates to your responsibilities. But in addition to that, you find time to be involved with the chamber here. Tell us about your what was a catalyst for your involvement, and then lead us up to your new and amazing position that's coming up in 2024.
So again, I've always been someone at the core that's generous, that gives, that volunteers. And so I've always started all of my work in the community through a volunteer capacity. That was my level of fulfillment, feeding the homeless, doing, when we had the tornadoes, volunteering with Operation Hope and doing the neighborhood cleanups. I've always done that. And so I've had the opportunity, like you said, to build relationships with people. Quite honestly, the chamber was not on my radar. I had just transitioned my career from SunTrust over to Wells Fargo, and I was eyeing some other opportunities to expand my career. And I ran into a friend that I served in the community with, and he asked, have you ever considered working and getting involved with the chamber? And quite honestly, I said, no, not really. I won't say that I've been shy of the camera in the forefront, but I was very comfortable just serving in the background, and that's kind of where I wanted to stay. And again, I think my life has been a collaboration of different relationships that have had serendipitous moments, and a conversation with one of my mentors. And she put some challenges on me. And I thought about it, and I called the gentleman back and I said, tell me next steps, and I'll definitely get involved and volunteer. What does that look like? So just going through a season of observation and serving on committees and getting a feel for the chamber is where I started. and then having a conversation with some other friends that I had built that, we had relationship with, that either we worked together or we had volunteered at some point in the community, asked me would I consider a seat at the table on the board. And based upon what they told me that the hope was, I agreed. I wanted to have an opportunity to be a part of a catalytic change here.
Sure.
And our chamber has not always been fully representative of our community.
Absolutely.
And to be able to create or help create that, or at least contribute conversation to ideation of what it could be and offer perspective, was my genuine intent in taking a seat at the table. I have a good friend that graduated from Georgia Tech, and his wife had just done some work on the Atlanta Beltline. I remember calling my friends. I was like, hey, I've never done anything like this before. I don't even know what this is going to turn out. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm calling like, y'all are going to be my reinforcement.
Yeah.
And if I need you, would you two be supportive and helping me? And they were like, well, we don't know what you need, but, you've always been helpful for us. And we had done some volunteer work before, in the Atlanta area. And so I met some friends up there, and I said, I'm trying to explore what this could look like. And you guys are more in this space. And would you be willing to help me be my sounding board, my safe space? And then tell me if I'm way off base and I need to pull out. Sometimes you need somebody to kind of watch your blind side. And so I built up a team of supporters, including my mentor, and I agreed to serve as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Chair at the Chamber. It was a stand-up division that we went through the process of doing a working group, some listening sessions, just to make sure we understood what some anecdotal data was for our community. And was this something that was necessary? Was it needed? How could it be relevant, impactful, and what would that look like?
So my mind is spinning. And so one of the first things that I thought about when we embarked upon this conversation, and you were mentioning that there, in terms of the chamber, that there was a lack of representation. And so I immediately went to Du Bois, and I can't recall the book that he addressed this matter in, but it's almost individuals of color and then women of color, Black women, that we almost live this schizophrenic life, if you will, where you are having to live in all of these different worlds. The point that I'm trying to make is we then have to always, I won't say always, but oftentimes have to make the decision of being the representation that we wish to see or we wish to have. And sometimes that can be a very lonely space, because you're oftentimes the first one to go out there and do it. And so you fortunately had some contacts or some people in place to say, hey, I need your help and your guidance with this. And it could be easy. It could have been easy to stand on the sidelines and say, I don't see anyone that looks like me, or we're not fully representing, or you're not fully representing what the dynamics or the composite is a better word of the community is. But you were called and you answered to that response. And you and I have had a couple conversations about one of our favorite women in the world, Melody Hobson, who is also in the same industry that you're in. But she has also talked about that being the one, and people would be at major events and you're Melody, you're Melody, and she would in her mind say, well, how do you know that I'm Melody? Well, for 1,001 reasons. Yeah, you and I are there. But the main one was because she was the only person, the only African American, the only woman of color, and that can be a very exhaustive journey, but one that we find ourselves having to take in honor of the generations before us and those that will come.
I mean, you said a mouthful, and I agree, because what happened in my industry, I think about my faith, and I do lean heavily on it when we think about what process looks like and how God kind of redirects our path. Like, I didn't have a career in banking in mind. It was definitely going to be an accounting pathway. And little did I know I would be thrust into a career where representation was not there. When I started in financial services And when I would go to conferences, not only was I the only black, most oftentimes I was the only woman. So being in a male-dominated industry where we haven't really even moved the needle that far, you know, in the financial services industries, there's about 5 to 7% representation of African-American black persons that serve outside of the traditional service model roles. Those are your bankers, your loan officers, your lenders, your financial advisors. And so it hasn't even gone that far, and it's heartbreaking, which was another thing for me that was a point of conviction. You know, I understood what that experience was when I'm at a conference and, you know, you feel awkward because nobody's there that looks like you can have conversations with. And while I was fortunate enough to have male colleagues that mentored me, that were embracing of my journey and supportive, it would have been a bit of a reward to feel a level of companionship with another woman. And eventually that did happen. But to your point, you know, black women, we have this intersectionality, right, that we have to manage. And thinking through, I have 2 daughters. And so I think through, how do I want them to remember their mom and their journey, and what did I take a stand for? I am very, very honored to serve my family in a way, to be able to uphold the legacy my grandparents always, you know, talked about, of doing what's right, and if not me, then who? And not always being the one that takes the opportunity to pass the buck, right? I had a difference that, you know, at some point there's going to have to be a reckoning, and it may just have to be with you. My faith tells me some people plant, some people water, and then some people harvest. So, you know, if my role is just to plant ideas, plant the opportunity for our girls in our community to see professional black women engaged, having conversations, supporting one another, then I'm happy to provide that landscape for them, and they can take it and grow it.
I love that. I love that. And also, and let me add this, and we're going to move on from this because this could be this topic would be all day. Yeah, is to also demonstrate that you are not an anomaly. And I know you and I have had this conversation before, and I remember having a conversation with a person in leadership, some maybe 20, well, no, maybe not that long, maybe about 15 years ago. And I said, now this might be the day that I'm going to lose my job. But I was willing to take the risk because the question that was posed is as if that I and some other women of color, and there were few in this space, were anomalies, and that there were no other Jeretha Peters out there. And I'm like, I've got a Rolodex. I know quite a few. Let's pick the industry. So what you also do and represent is to showcase, and now I'm reminded of Rosalind Brewer of Walgreens, the CEO, where she has in similar situations had to educate those who did not look like her that she was not a part of the wait staff. She was not there to be the assistant to help guide, that she was in fact there to serve in the same capacity as her colleagues are, that I too am in a leadership role. And I know we're getting close to our time, so we're going to definitely have to do another part 2. But please share with the viewers a book that has most impacted your life outside of your preferred religious text. And then my second question is 2 to 3 individuals that you would have for dinner, and why would you invite them, and what would you serve? So we'll start with the book.
I'm an avid reader, and when I think through what's probably one book that's been the most influential in my leadership role is probably Mel Robbins' The 5-Second Rule.
Okay.
Like I said, you know, with a degree in accounting, we're very analytical, and I can get caught in an analytical deep dive and overthink.
Okay.
And one of the tenets of the 5-second rule is how to make a decision quickly and get out of that loop of procrastination. Yeah. And so that has been helpful in the leadership role because I lead a team of South Georgia branches, and so my responsibilities are great, and I can't get bogged down in trying to find all of the little details before making a decision. So that has really helped me in my leadership, being able to make decisions, critical decisions quickly, and being okay that if I make the wrong decision, own it and find the way to correct it. Sure. So that has been the most influential non-religious text for me. And if I'll pivot to your second question, this may be a controversial answer. A couple people that I'd have an invitation to dinner would first probably be, the first person would be Anita Hill.
Okay.
I would like to enjoy a conversation with Anita Hill because I've watched her documentary, and her intentions were not a result. Let me try to figure out the best way to say this. What she intended created a result or an action that she didn't expect.
Sure.
And I'd like to know from her, because I was in the workforce at that time, and I remember the grumblings of other black women who were hating her. Like, you're ruining our community. And sometimes I find myself in spaces where people really don't understand that sometimes my intentions have created a reaction that I did not truly intend.
Yes.
But it doesn't eliminate the daggers and the words and things that they've said and spoken. So I'd like to just pick her brain on how did you manage that, maintain your sanity, and continue to give back and serve your students in a way that you still show up and you're present. You didn't recluse back into your own world and cower. I'd love to have that conversation with her for that reason. It'd be great.
Yes, absolutely.
And then probably my next person is a little bit more lighthearted, would be the singer Adele.
Okay.
Because a couple of things. I remember, I have fond memories of my grandmother's house, and we was a family holiday, and my aunt came home from Atlanta, and she was playing this, and I'm like, who is that? And she did not sound how she looked. So when I read we had CDs back then, so this is how long it's been. When I picked up the CD and I looked at the CD cover, and I'm like, well, who is she? Right. And she didn't even sound British or anything. So then I just became an avid fan, and learning her story that she has a family that was similar to how I was raising my daughters. She's from a single parent home, and she liked Etta James. And she's often talked about how she would just sing Etta James songs. And so for me, there were things that I would do that children that looked like me didn't always do.
Yes.
And so she shared her story about how she had this love for soul music, which was, something different than she was probably expected to have. And so I'd like to just have that conversation with her. And then most recently, she's been in the news where she's had a concert and a heckler tried to heckle her, and she heckled her and heckled back. So just being able to be bold and confident, and how she showed up in that space and some of the other challenges she's gone through. I think she's a pretty quite phenomenal woman.
Yes. Well, those are two amazing. I'm going to work backwards. I was just in Vegas for another concert, and when I was, at the hotel I was staying at, they were like, "Are you here for the Adele concert?" And I'm like, "No, but I wish I had known. I would have added that to my list." She is really an exemplary performer and a very beautiful voice. And so again, how we make assumptions just on how someone sounds, and then when you get to meet them, and I'm sure you and I have had that.
Happened several times.
Anyway, so that's a whole nother conversation. We'll have to have it another time. And then absolutely Anita Hill, and you'll have to read her memoir about that whole experience. It is really just heart-wrenching, and you're absolutely used the perfect word, because when I read it, and that whole ordeal played out, and you were able to stay sane. Not even so much because of the aftermath of when she, exposed him to the world in terms of her experiences, how she stayed sane during the experience prior when she worked in that environment. So those would be amazing guests. I can pour the water or the wine. I would like to be there if not a guest. I can certainly help in some kind of way. That
Absolutely.
would be great.
Sure, I'd like to build tables and invite others.
I love it. And but I can't let you off. What would you serve?
So Anita, Mississippi, she's a good Southern girl, so I need to make sure that I'm coming with a Southern cuisine, whatever that may be, cornbread and collard greens, very traditional Southern meal, macaroni and cheese. That's what most of my family members always request for me to make. So I definitely would serve her my mac and cheese, but just very Southern. And with Adele, we'll have tea and crumpets.
I love it.
Some Earl Grey tea with a splash of cream.
I love it. All well thought out. Yeah, that's that analytical mind at play, I see. It has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I know this will be one of many. Albany State, outside of it being your home as it relates to you being an alum, just please know that you are always welcome to come back. We need you to continue to pour into our students.
Absolutely.
And that one venture, you know what I'm talking about, that I wanted to make happen, I'm still confident that that's going to happen in the near future. We won't put it out there yet.
Well,
but
listen, I love Albany State. It's the place that my heart is.
Yes.
I advocate for Albany State, and however, I'm here to help support the students, the professors, the instruction, the whole staff. I'm here.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much,
Thank
Ms.
you.
Jeretha Peters.
Thank
Viewers, thank you for this edition of Realizing Potential. I'm Wendy Wilson, and I look forward to seeing you next time.